Good evening and welcome to the Tyngsborough Finance Committee meeting. Happy 2026. Today is January 8th, 2026 at 6 o'clock, and we can start our FinCom meeting now. And because we've got extra faces, we will start with introductions. And Ron, we'll start with you.
Good evening, Ron Schneider, Select Board.
Good evening, Eric Eldridge, Select Board.
Bill Kerrigan, Finance Committee.
Carolyn Scafidi, Finance Committee.
Larry Clausen, Finance Committee.
Ralph Catalano, Finance Committee.
Good evening, Colin Loisel, Town Manager.
Good evening, Sean Walsh, Assistant Town Manager.
David Andrews, Finance Director.
All good. All right, so we have minutes on the agenda to approve. Can I get a motion to?
approve October 8th minutes.
Okay, motion to approve. Second?
Second.
Discussion?
None.
All good here. So with that, all in favor of approving the meeting minutes for October 8th, 2025, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, abstained, and those meetings are approved. And moving right along to item 3, fiscal year 2027 budget presentation. Colin, I am thinking you're the lucky person
Yes,
that gets to be in the middle of this.
absolutely. Good evening. Good to be here with our first presentation on the fiscal year 2027 budget. This is a slide that members that have been on Finance Committee have seen before. It's the way that we approach the budget. Every year since I took over in 2023, we've been moving the process up by like a couple weeks, to modestly get us a little bit earlier in the process. So this year we had department heads submit their request to our office by December 4th. And throughout the budget process, the instructions are clear to department heads that the requests they should submit are for a level service budget. It wouldn't be right to call it a level funded budget because obviously utilities increase, the cost to fuel things and salaries go up. But level service in that the budget requests that they submit assume no new positions and no new major initiatives. Once we get all of the requests, we meet individually with each department head and go through each line item. We look at how their budget for this fiscal year is trending, what they've spent in prior years, and if there are changes to their budget beyond the contractual increases, then we work to understand why that's happening. Separately, we ask departments to submit a memo to us if they're looking to add new initiatives or new staff. So the numbers that we get in their budget requests are just for that level service budget. And if they think that they need anything above and beyond, then we receive that in a separate memo. We can move on to the next slide. So the landscape surrounding the fiscal year 27 budget. On a positive note, fiscal year 27 is the last of 3 years where most of our collective bargaining agreements are settled. So we knew the labor costs going into the planning process. All but one contract will expire at the end of fiscal year 27 next year in collective bargaining for the remaining 6 contracts. We had a very early meeting with the school department. You're all likely familiar with the 2.7% increase that the schools had committed to sticking to over a 5-year period, which was part of the overall commitment to reduce the middle school debt by $1,900,000 of that appears in the general fund budget, and $100,000 comes from the Lakeview school lease, which is a non-general fund item that the school department has. When we met with them, we knew that 27 was going to be a challenging year, and so they agreed to extend that agreement, basically making it year 6. In an initial meeting with Maya, which is our health insurance provider, we were told that we should expect to see a health insurance increase of up to 25%. That's largely due only to the loss ratios, and simply put, the loss ratio is what the insurance company sees as the money they're paying out for our claims above and beyond what we're paying in premium. So the insurance company sees that as a loss. They look back over a 3-year period. And so when they set your rates, they're looking to make up that difference in the future rates. The one thing that I've been clear, I've talked to all the employees about this. I've talked to the select board about this. When we talk about those loss ratios, the major claims that we're seeing are not claims that could be predicted. It's not things that having a wellness program, which we do have, but you're talking people with debilitating diseases. You're talking about people in incredibly tragic and unplanned circumstances that needed medical attention. So it's the way the system is. It's kind of crappy, but we know that 25% is high. for reference, last year we saw a 17% increase. And I have future slides that talk about what we're doing on the health insurance front. And then again, the $1 million contribution to the middle school, again, $900,000 you see reflected in the budget. $100,000 is a transfer when we pay the debt service from the Lakeview Ave lease. And as you all have probably seen in your own personal lives, utility expenses are incredibly high. And if you look at the budgets for all of the departments that have their own buildings, electricity is up, the cost of gas is up. That's something that everybody is dealing with right now. On the revenue side, we're cognizant that we'll see a leveling out of building permits. Toll Brothers is reaching total completion. They're substantially complete at this phase of the project, but certainly by the end of this fiscal year, they will be complete. And so over the last 3 years, we saw year over year pretty steady increases in our revenue from licenses and permits, largely driven by the building permits that were being pulled at pretty rapid pace to complete the Toll Brothers project. We know that project is over, and so you see that there's a flattening out of those fees in the proposed budget. Similarly, we know that new growth is limited in fiscal year 27. We have a few larger projects that are on the horizon that simply haven't come to fruition, largely around utility issues. And so I point to the two biggest ones that would have been big new growth drivers. If you've gone up Kendall Road past the park and ride, right next to our DPW yard, you can see the construction of a warehouse. That site's permitted for 2 warehouses. The one they're currently building is the smaller of 2. There is a sewer capacity issue on this side of the bridge because Tyngsborough doesn't treat its own sewer. So we rely on intermunicipal agreements with Dracut, Chelmsford, and Lowell to send our waste elsewhere. All of those communities are also at capacity. So in order for a development like this on Kendall Road to work, they had to create their own private sewer infrastructure and basically connect to a northern point on Middlesex Road, which is the system that goes under the bridge and over to Dracut, where we do have capacity. However, they're not building the critical components of that infrastructure until they build their second, much larger warehouse. And they've been struggling to find tenants for that warehouse because I've recently learned that there's a electric capacity issue with National Grid that's affecting Westford. Tewksbury's had some projects that were delayed. This is the first one we've seen where National Grid has said, well, that use there might not work. And so they've met with tenants, some of whom are very promising, some of whom would be great additions for that warehouse. But unfortunately, they can't get a commitment from National Grid for the electricity. So that project, although they will finish this year, the smaller warehouse, that larger warehouse, which would really drive the new growth, is kind of in limbo until National Grid performs a study, identifies the capital improvements that need to be made, and then, of course, funds and actually executes those capital improvements. On that same stretch of roadway, you may remember town meeting 2 years ago or 1 year ago, rezoned the allowed uses or where you could have an assisted living facility, continuing care campus, to include a B2, specifically targeting a parcel of land at 84 Kendall Road, which is on Flint Pond. Last year, the select board entered into a development agreement that saw some mitigation payments for treatment of Flint Pond. They have a developer ready to go, but likewise, they have no sewer capacity. They have entered into or are currently negotiating a sewer agreement with 93 Kendall Road, but until 93 Kendall Road builds their sewer infrastructure, 84 Kendall Road can't do anything. And again, 93 Kendall Road won't build the sewer infrastructure, so they build their bigger building, and they can't build their bigger building until they have a tenant. So these are 2 very large projects that, through no fault of their own or of the town's, they're unable to move forward. So I say all this to say that we know that new growth won't be as beneficial as it was as Toll Brothers was coming online. And, you know, I talk about this every time the select board talks about it, finance committee has, school committee, state aid is expected to remain stagnant. We did see a one-time boost last year in the Chapter 90 funding, which was fantastic. That helps us pave more roads, but that money can't supplement the general fund. So for the purposes of our budget planning, that wasn't super helpful. And then the last note on the revenue is that our cannabis excise growth is much slower than desired. The second facility is not performing the way that we had hoped it would. We never accounted for a doubling of the revenue. We knew that between the 2 facilities, they would steal from each other, but we haven't even seen, you know, the revenue to correspond with the second facility opening. So that's a high-level budget landscape on the revenue side, and I'm going to turn it over to Dave Andrews to go
Actually,
over.
I've just got a really quick curiosity question on National Grid. So do they not have the capacity to make the electricity that is required for the larger plant, or is it just infrastructure? Is the problem delivering, or is the problem creating?
The problem is delivering. The infrastructure, according to National Grid, and I attended a meeting, they coordinated a meeting with all the regional managers probably 3 months ago now, and the issue is about getting the energy through their aging infrastructure to the different areas that are having the issue. Of course, they see the problem slightly different than most people do. There's a regulatory scheme in Massachusetts whereby they can only pass on the costs of their capital expenditures to taxpayer or to ratepayers through the rates if the Department of Public Utilities approves it. A couple months ago, there was a lot of talk about whether or not DPU would approve substantial rate hikes for Eversource. National Grid's argument is that they can't make the capital investment without DPU approving it, because then they can't bill you back for the capital investment. So on their own, if National Grid wanted to use their own money and not pass it on to the ratepayers, they could go make the utility infrastructure improvements today. There's been this blame game where DPU says that they could do it, they just need to use their earnings, their reserves, and National Grid says, no, we can't do it because we have to be able to pass on that rate increase to pay off the capital improvements, and DPU has apparently minimized what that increase could be. So there's energy, it's just that the lines that come here and all the infrastructure along the way are aging and can't handle any additional load. Okay, turn it over to David.
Good evening. All right, we're going to dive into the revenue side of things. So how do we calculate the revenue? It's a collaboration between the assessor's office, my office, economic development, building commissioner, and the town manager's office. Generally, we're looking at the 5-year trends coming out of COVID. I've been using more of like a 3-year, but we're getting, some more years to work with here. Analyzing the current fiscal year trend to see how everything's tracking. That's how we develop the revenue number for the next year. We anticipate new growth based off the input from the departments above. Just on Monday, we had the conversation where we sat down with the chief assessor and the building commissioner. And then we consider factors that play into the revenue streams that we may know are coming, like for instance, the building permits. We understand that that's not going to perpetual growth. For FY26, earnings on investments, which has significantly grown the last couple of years, and licenses and permits have, as mentioned, have maintained their previous gains. Fees and forfeitures have bounced back. They were a little short last year. They're not a very big revenue source, but hotels and meals tax are down, same with that marijuana excise. Now, we get those quarterly, so there's one more payment that we need to review that we just received at the end of December that we'll have a better idea of like the marijuana excise, because the Yellow House did just open up, I believe, in June of last year. So that was a very small portion that we got to kind of extrapolate data from. Overall, it's not that revenue is lacking, it's just that it's not the same growth as that we're able to project year over year. Oftentimes I've said that we budget so conservative that, and there'll be a graph here in a second, that where we budget, say the local receipts, we're coming in 10% over every year, which is roughly $500,000 a year. And then each year that's been growing 10%. And I just don't feel comfortable that, we'll still remain conservative when we're budgeting, but I'm not sure that the 10% growth is going to be there. This kind of is just a repeat of what I just said. So we're talking about the Toll Brothers wrapping up, and then the canvas excise is a little to be determined, but we're not seeing, we had originally budgeted $400,000, which was, we were hoping that it would be 300, and this is just the 25% that goes to the general fund. That's when I talk about this dollar amount. We were hoping that it would be 300 and 100. That was our projection, but it doesn't look like it's working out there. Again, we don't have a whole lot of information from the LHUS at this moment. This is what we use for a trending category. The average percentage is the average over the last couple of years. Okay, so that's, I'm saying, on average, we've received this amount of this category as of the end of November. Okay, so I take the dollar amount we have, divided by the average, the amount that we've normally received, and that's how we get the projected number. Budgeted is the one that we voted for, you know, that was used to balance the budget from the annual town meeting. And then you'll see the variance on the right. You can see in my notes here, reviewing a couple of the other excise and campus excise with Q2 payment, miscellaneous revenue. We had that drop because there's been a return of funds from the IRS from quarterly. It's based off an estimate. And we just don't want to categorize that as revenue going forward anymore because we did not receive it in '25, and therefore we don't want to continually put that as revenue if that's how we shouldn't be accounting for it. Historically, we did, but that's what the difference is there. You'll see in the '27 budget that we put that back down to $50,000 out of the miscellaneous revenue. So overall, you can see this variance of a short $132,000, but that's not, you can see it's carried by licenses and permits, but generally speaking, everything's right around where we expected it to be. Again, it's November, this through November, and so things can certainly change, and we will follow them. This is the local receipt budget versus actual that I was just mentioning. 2021 was certainly affected by COVID. But you can see in '22, that's about $400,000, right? So that's roughly 8-9% difference. 2023 is a little over 400,000. 2024, just under 5. So again, this is we budgeted and we received about 10% over, and then year over year, you can see that it went up as well. I put this together for building permits, but I think it might confuse more than it helps. What this was trying to portray was that the amount we received for building receipts over the last 3 years was that percent received number, the 43, 43, 56, okay? The middle square is supposed to show how much building permits make of our license and permit total. Okay, and then the bottom is a projection based off of, well, as of November, you know, the projection amount, dollar amount we have. If you use the percent received through the prior 3 years, this is the projection for this year. And then for I used 55% on the local receipt, which, so again, we're trying to be conservative. Last year was 56%. That means that we've already received 55%, and the higher number is going to be, you know, there's less remaining. So again, it's just, this was supposed to say that if we're expecting things to go back to 2023 levels, we had only received 40% at that time, but I might have dove in a little too deep in there. This is a 5-year look back. This is just to kind of show how the revenue goes up each year. Not that it goes up, obviously we get the 2.5%, right, plus new growth. And then for the levy limit, you get to add the debt, exempt debt right in. So you can see from 2021 to 22, that's only $800,000. There's a jump. The next year is about 1.6 million. 24, the big jump that is the debt exclusion interest. Okay, that counts as a revenue source, and that's why 25 is so high, because that has the debt, excluded debt as well. This is projected revenue, okay, going forward. The assumptions I made were that we'd have an average of 500,000 in new growth, which is probably ambitious. State aid, I had at 0.75%. You know, that's about average of what they do. I level projected local receipts for the entire time. Because while we know that the building permits are gonna go down, I do expect that motor vehicle excise, which goes up about 2.5% every year, and cannabis will increase. It does increase every year, it's just not to the levels that we had hoped currently. And then we receive fringe and indirect, that's because our enterprise uses our building and we pay their health insurance. So we receive funds from our enterprise departments. Those are gonna increase based off the utility costs, right, and health insurance, okay? But I level funded those at about $300,000 a year. That is the dollar amount you see on the budget, that's called the other available funds. Okay.
All right. So I'll take it over to talk about expenditures unless, do we want to pause so you can ask David questions about revenue, or do you want to dive right into expenditures?
Anyone have any revenue questions right now that,
From the catch-up revenue, right, and the projected true-up on the billing there, what is the impact on the percentage-wise? Because the levy is on 2.5%, right? So whatever we couldn't cover through the general fund, we couldn't tax the people we had to cover through the general fund is lost at 2.5% now over the next 5 years as well?
No, so you're talking about the tax billing issue? That doesn't impact the levy. The levy limit is how much you can legally bill based on your taxable values, which increases by Prop 2.5 and any new growth. That, we were always allowed to bill that. We didn't bill to the full amount, but just because we didn't bill to the full amount doesn't mean that the levy is reduced. The levy is set when town meeting votes on the budget, that sets the levy. So our levy hasn't gone down as a result of that. Of course, the negative implication is that this year taxpayers are paying more than they would have because we're making up 700,000 of it, but the levy limit is unchanged. And as you'll see in future slides, that has no impact on the fiscal year 27 budget. The $700,000 that's collected this year will end up in the free cash that gets certified and that only town meeting can spend. So that's typically, you see a warrant article to deposit money into stabilization. You see free cash used for capital. That's the free cash money. It's revenue that you didn't need for the budget. And since the town meeting budget that we presented in May of 2025 didn't include that $700,000, it can't be spent. It ends up in free cash, and then in the next town meeting, not May of 2026, potentially in October 1 or May of 2027, it would be part of that pool of funds that town meeting appropriates. Again, stabilization, capital. We've never used free cash to supplement the budget, so those are really your main categories. I think that answers your
So,
question.
yeah, so it's essentially a loss of $700K of funds that the town has in this case, right?
It's not a loss of the 700,000 because the state is making us make that up. The amount that the state is not letting us make up is
Oh,
the
is the
remaining
other- okay.
418,000. That's the loss, if you will, because we won't be billing that. But the 700,000 is not lost.
Okay.
It's just not available to be spent currently.
That's what gets backflushed through the additional billing, or the increased
Correct.
billing, yes, okay.
and the 418,000 could be looked at as a win for property taxpayers in Tyngsborough.
As a savings.
Those are your words. That is money. We will have to, I guess no, because even though we didn't collect it last year, we will use existing sources, which is ultimately tax money we eventually collected or previously collected. We'll use that tax money to make up for it. It is 418,000 that we could have billed that we didn't, but we're using tax money that we've already billed to supplement it.
So Colin, when we then take that 418, we didn't bill it, you apply the levy, do you apply to what you billed, or do you apply to what was allowed to be billed?
Allowed to be billed.
Okay, that's where
Yeah.
I was missing, so I thought we lost like a compound 2.5% year on year.
Only what you're allowed to be billed is the levy limit. And there are some communities that aren't at their levy limit. We happen to be at our levy limit. We always have been. But there are some communities, I think Lowell has like $13 million in excess levy capacity. But yes, the levy limit is based on what you are allowed to build, not what you did bill.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay? Move on to expenditures.
Yes, please.
All right. Okay, so the total level service department request is $55.7 million. That includes the $900,000 general fund contribution to the middle school debt. Again, repeating that $100,000 to get us to the million comes from the Lakeview lease. But because we don't raise and appropriate that, it doesn't show up on the budget that town meeting approves. A 25% increase in health insurance, just to show what that means, that's a $1.3 million increase in health insurance alone. While Greater Lowell Tech has not yet released their assessments, I spoke to their business administrator last week, and we're expecting a 20% increase. Most of that is fixed already, so that's based on enrollment. Our enrollment at Greater Lowell Tech went up by 16 students. It's based on their debt payments, so similar to how we, on excluded debt, we add that on top of a tax bill. When the regional school district incurs debt, it splits that out on top of our assessment amongst all the member communities. It also includes an assumption for transportation, but I want to call that out because Tyngsborough Public Schools are in the last year, or we have one more year left of our transportation contract that was negotiated 5 years ago. That's a 5.7% increase. We've seen contracts in other districts settled at higher than 5.7, 6, 7, some even as high as 8%. And so I'm flagging it as this 20% assumes that their rate increases in that 4% range. I don't know what kind of relationship they have with their vendor. I know that they've had a long time relationship, so that's possible. But that might increase once they settle their transportation contract, which they don't anticipate settling until March. Again, it includes the...
For the record, we don't pay a tremendous amount in the debt or the transportation costs for Greater Lowell Tech. It's all based on the enrollment side. So it's about $17,000, a little bit more than that per student. So the vast majority do not come from those two sections of their budget.
And Greater Lowell comes and presents their budget, so we'll make sure that the finance committee knows what day that is. Usually the superintendent and their business administrator comes as well. Again, it's the 2.7% increase in the Tyngsborough Public School budget, and property insurance is much higher in the fiscal 27 budget, not because insurance rates are higher. Those were beautiful increases, 2.2%. But in fiscal 26, we replaced the old middle school, which was valued at probably less than $12 million, with the brand new middle school, which resulted in a $96,000 increase. So I'm just flagging that if you compare year over year, it's a major increase. It isn't because the insurance rates are going up or because we've had massive losses. It's because we added a brand new school to the roster. Okay, so this is the slide where I deliver the bad news. What you see here is what the total requests are. That's that 55.7. That represents a 3.7% increase over fiscal year 26. And with the revenue that David presented, we're looking at about a $2 million deficit. Now, this is projected. I've talked about a lot of things that are assumptions. But as you all know, the revenue is expected to increase by basically only enough to cover our health insurance increase. And so you can see where that causes a problem. I do just want to flag the items that we did not include. So I mentioned at the beginning that the requests we receive are for a level service budget, and then anything additional we ask departments to send us a separate memo. So this year we did not include the conversion of a part-time custodian to a full-time custodian. We did not include any new seasonal employees for the DPW. We did not include a request to add a new patrol officer to the police department. And unfortunately, for the third year in a row, we did not include the funding to create a new full-time fire inspector position in the fire department. While these were not included in the budget, I want to be clear that these are not a reduction in service. These are new initiatives that the individual departments wanted to have that we simply couldn't fund this year. Again, some of this language, these presentations are available on the website, so I added extra language that I know you all know, so that the average person reading at home can know. But a deficit is when your revenues are not expected to meet your expenditures. I've said it already, but to be totally clear, this is unrelated to the tax billing issue that we talked about. And a question that I'm sure will come to mind is, what cushion do we have in the budget? And I think of cushion as anything that we could cut right away without residents noticing an impact in service. And the answer is that there's nothing remaining on the general fund side, because last year we eliminated the general fund roads contribution. We had spent the last 5 years building up from 50,000. We made it all the way to 300,000. That was the first thing to get cut last year. The timing worked out because that was also the first year we saw a dramatic increase in Chapter 90, so it ended up leveling out. But because that was cut last year, it's not in this level service budget, so that's not another area that we could go and cut. Again, I've mentioned this, but the current budget assumes the same staffing level, and it also assumes recurring expense lines, which of course have been adjusted. Software goes up every year, the cost to fuel trucks, so there are increases on that sense, but it doesn't include any major new items that would have otherwise not been funded. So is this uncommon in Tyngsborough? Yes, but across the Commonwealth, no. I told the select board this. Each one of our neighboring communities, with the exception of Lowell, as I've told you, they have a tremendous amount of excess levy capacity, has found themselves in this exact same situation in the last 2 fiscal years, some even longer. This is the first year that we found ourselves in this deficit. It's $2 million. That's a big number, but when you see the scope of our budget, it's not a dramatic number. And so we're not yet, I would not say that we're in a structural deficit. If you look at some of our neighbors who I won't call out, every year their deficit gets deeper and deeper, and they can't make cuts fast enough to stem the tide. I'm not saying that next year will be all roses. I'm just saying that we've hit this much later than many of our neighbors, and I think that there are clear paths forward. I also want to note that one of the unique things here is that we didn't end up generating, and at the select board's meeting on the 26th, we're going to show what we hope to get for new growth back in 2021, 2022, and what we actually did. But we committed $900,000 from the general fund to the middle school debt. That accounted for nearly all of the new growth that we saw over the last 3 years. And the reason I point that out is because without new growth, the levy limit can only increase 2.5%. But as a part of this same agreement, we raised half of the budget, slightly more. The schools represent about 63%, by 2.7. So we cut all the new growth out, and then we still raised higher. So over time, this caught up with us. Again, there are paths forward, but I wanted to demonstrate why we've reached this point right now. So has our budget planning led to this? On the staffing side, and I'm speaking for the town side of the budget, we've invited the school committee to attend a select board meeting on January 26th, and they can talk about their budget. I don't know it like I do ours. But on the town side, we haven't added a new full-time position in the last 3 years. We have converted 3 previously part-time positions to full-time positions. And in the current fiscal year, we converted a part-time dispatcher position into an 8th full-time dispatcher, which has helped mitigate overtime costs. So we previously budgeted roughly $40,000 for part-time dispatchers. We spent about $30,000 more to make that full-time, but we haven't spent as much in overtime costs because we're not rushing to fill part-time shifts with people who are already at their 40 hours because this is now a new full-time position. That might not continue into next year. We're only in January, so I want to see where the numbers line up. It's trending that we're spending less in overtime, which will create that wash that we were looking for. But certainly if we get to March and that reverses, we would go back to a part-time position, and that 8th dispatcher would no longer be a full-time position. The last full-time position we added wasn't necessarily a person, but it was when we added the 5th firefighter on duty at a time at the fire department. That was during the day only. So that's not a new position because we fill it with the same number of firefighters. We have a combination call and full-time department. But in fiscal 22, we added that full-time cost by saying that we will staff a 5th firefighter every day during the day portion. Not at night. At night we go down to 4, but during the day we're at 5. And we're currently working, the select board at their, not last meeting, but the meeting before that, approved an IMA with Drakeit to form a VSO cluster to provide veteran services to both Drakeit and Tyngsborough. That's a budget neutral, if not cost saving measure, because now Drakeit is going to they're going to pay half of all of our costs, salary, benefits, fringe benefits, supplies. The supply line is very little. So while that will change the status of an administrative assistant from part-time to full-time, even at that, with Drakeit eating 50% of the cost, it will be budget neutral or reduce the veteran services budget. I'm not going to go through every one of these slides, but for folks that are viewing it at home, as I'm sure many people are, I did a staffing analysis for every one of the departments that fall under my purview, just to show where staff has been added and where staff haven't been added, so that people can really look at this and say, Were there areas that we added too many people? I think you'll see that that's not the case, but all of that information is in here, and if you go through all the slides, it's for every department that falls under the select board and town manager. On the expense side, again, the largest drivers of our non-personnel costs are health insurance. I mentioned the 17% increase last year and the 25% increase this year. Tyngsborough is not unique to that. That's happening everywhere. The cost of utilities is increasing, vehicle maintenance, and facilities upkeep. The cost to maintain all of our public buildings is increasing. Many of our buildings are reaching the age where things that maybe aren't capital eligible are now needing to be replaced. A great example, last year, summer, we celebrated the 10-year anniversary of us operating out of the 169 Westford Road building for our Council on Aging. That was a building that was gifted to the town didn't pay for the building, but now we're starting to see key components of the HVAC system that need to be replaced. And individually, they're small, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 expenses, but when you look at what we've traditionally budgeted for the facilities over there, it's $3,000 or $4,000. So it's not enough to trigger a capital request, but it ends up in the budget, which is driving up costs. I think I covered. And then the cost to maintain vehicles, of course. As our fleets get older, I know the DPW is still running 3 2002 dump trucks, so harder to find parts, harder to find people who are still working on them. And the same is true for the fire department. The police cruisers tend to be newer, so it's a little less problematic on the cost front. But these are things that are starting to add up, and capital has done a great job investing in some of those vehicles. We're still waiting for DPW, and Sean will talk about this in the second part of the meeting. 3 years ago, we ordered a new dump truck, and we're still waiting for it because getting dump trucks has become an Olympic sport, basically. So immediate steps. On Monday morning, we met with the school superintendent and the business administrator, and they're going back to the drawing board to sharpen their pencils. Again, we've asked them to attend a joint meeting with the select board to really understand what goes into their budget planning, what is similar analysis that you saw tonight on the general fund side. On our side, we had a all-staff meeting yesterday morning, and departments are going through their expenses right now, and they're zeroing them out, and they're only adding right now things that they have contracts for. So if you think police department, that's the contract for their CAD software. The fire department, it's their IM responding, it's the ambulance systems. And then we'll meet with them all a second time, and anything that they don't have a contract for, we'll add back in only if we can justify it as being critical to their expenses. It's a great exercise to do every year. It's certainly going to help. We anticipate that this will generate between $150,000 and $250,000 in savings just as a part of this exercise. But we know that there are some areas that we can't cut or go back to this current year levels. Electricity, the fuel for police vehicles, fire. So I expect by the 26th, I'll be able to report back to the select board what that number did to us and where we stand. We've brought on an independent health insurance contractor who's reviewing our current plans, and we're issuing a request for proposals in February. The request for proposals will appear as though we're looking to start our own trust, which is not feasible. It would require us to generate like $7 million up front to form the trust. But the pressure has generally, with Maya, saw them decrease. If they know that you can't afford this and you've gone through the work of bringing someone on, they'll generally decrease your rates to match whatever responses you get. So that might save us 2, 3, or 4%. On 1.3 million, we'll take the savings. Long term, we've started the conversation with our employees and with the unions about where do we go from here. To be frank, there's really only one option aside from Maya, and that's to join the Group Insurance Commission. That's the state plan. Their rate increases have been far lower than ours. Their rates are, in many cases, cheaper than ones that we have. It is a big change, and so we're working with employees to help them see that. But it is what a lot of municipalities are doing. The days of forming regional health trusts are gone. We were in one until 2017, which is when we joined Maya. That has since folded. All of the remaining ones here have folded. I think there's 2 strong ones left, one in the Berkshires and one on the Cape. And even they're actively looking at joining the GIC. So that, unfortunately, it's too late to do that for fiscal year 27. The state requires that you notify them of your intent to join by December 1st. So we've missed that. But that, certainly long-term will help our insurance rates be much more sustainable. Because remember, we're paying 70% of this, but the same increase we're seeing, employees are seeing, and so that's becoming unsustainable, not just for our budget planning, but for employees as well. And then, we do this every year, and I'm not saying that this is going to make a difference this year, but we just have to keep the pressure on the state. We sent a letter to the legislature a couple meetings ago to try to change the narrative. The MMA put out a report. They call it the 351 to 351 is the initiative I'm talking about, basically showing that if the state aid had maintained at the rate of inflation, they would be giving out $351 million more in state aid than they currently are. Now, that report included other things that we talked about. The conversation in a lot of communities is about the flaws of Prop 2.5, and I think that the argument we made was that the state collects enough revenue in taxes already that if they just change their budget priorities, they could give more in state aid, and then 2.5 would work. Instead, the state, in my opinion, and I'm speaking for myself, not the select board, keeps the money, and then cities and towns have to be the bad guys when they say, well, we can't fund basic services, now we have to go for a Prop 2.5, which are a large override, which are largely unsuccessful. So that is something that hopefully the legislature catches on to. Again, our budget planning doesn't hinge on it, but it would be a nice fix. So again, I mentioned this, but once we've completed the zero expense exercise, we'll present an updated number to the select board at its meeting on January 26th. I anticipate that there'll be conversations with the school committee on January 26th, should they be able to attend, about what steps they'll take. And that's when I'll really be able to present a more finite path forward. Until we know how much of this the school department is going to absorb, it's tough for me to present a real fine path forward. But we know there is a path forward. It's just figuring out the share, and then I can give a much better anticipation of where it will land. I think that's the last slide. Yeah.
Are we allowed to go forward with the deficit?
No,
That's what I thought.
we are
Okay.
statutorily required, and we will. Town meeting will see a balanced budget in May of 2027, or 2026, excuse me. We're just in the phase where we figure out how we get there.
Okay. All right. Questions?
Are we going to be getting any extra funding from taxes once the Toll Brother is all done with their development?
So to date, I think in one of the slides, we've received about $830,000 in new growth from Toll Brothers. I anticipate that they'll finish the rest of I believe they have 14 in various stages of construction. So we could expect to see the remaining 200,000 in this current fiscal year, which we are factoring in, because we'll see it before June 30th, that will count toward our new growth for next year. Once that's done, that will then become part of the levy, which then only increases by 2.5% every year.
That would be a net loss though, right? Because they're not going to be pulling as many permits at this point. Assuming they have the bigger projects, I know you had a big spot holder for some of them. It's got to be a net loss in total versus what they pull in permits. What they're going to add now that they've done their projects.
No, because it will compound every year. It's going to go up that 2.5%. On the building permit front, there are still large things being built here. This warehouse is one. They're spending an exorbitant amount of money on building permits. And even though the temple that's being built at 50 Westford Road isn't going to add to the tax levy because it's a religious tax exempt, they are paying building permit fees. So those are, and that's a huge temple. Those are generating it. It's just that Toll Brothers will slow down. But in the long run, the new growth is far outweighing the permits that they're paying, because every year it's going to increase by that Prop 2.5.
Well, and the permit itself is a one-time fee.
Right.
The taxes of, right now, it's 830,000. That's every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, understood. It's just the small inflection point between the taxes and the permit pulling, right? Because that's a one-time surge of money, and then as those grow, it only balance out or neutralize, right? So
Yeah,
they're
the-
not going to pull $500,000 of taxes and we get $180K of revenue.
Yeah, the other thing, so licenses and permits is a there's a multi-factor to that. So one is Toll Brothers. We did a lot of licenses and permits. The other, and we probably should look at what the impact of this is, we raised the fees for the first time in a while. So, you know, when you look at some of these, I think that's why David, when he did his analysis, he's looking at it by saying, the volume may go back to 2023, but the amounts that are there because we're charging higher rates could make it so it's close to, not as much of an impact.
And if I may add, and maybe we should add this as well, building permits is in Toll Brothers permits, right? That not 100% of building permits. So we're not just going back down to zero in building permits. So maybe I should have fleshed that out as well, is showing that, you know, there's license and permits is still another 30% of that total, plus the building permits that we do regularly.
It'd be helpful just to follow up with the amount that you put in the forecast tied to the larger initiatives if we can't get it through the loop with National Grid on the infrastructure side. And then thank you for sharing the fees increase and stuff. I wasn't considering that in there, but even small upticks do add up.
And you'll see it even in the recreation, I think, the rental rec, it's which one, it's one of those other ones or miscellaneous revenues. We did see an uptick in that one, we're renting out more, and the fees are a little bit higher. So it's not huge, so I wouldn't call it out.
Right.
But there are little things like that where we're trying to catch up.
Yeah, it softens the blow, right? It cushions it a little bit as things wind down.
Colin, you had mentioned that for the health insurance from Maya, they said that the increase could be as high as 25%. When will we get better clarity on what that actual number will be?
We will, I will know for certain the first week in February. Typically, the Maya Trust has its annual meeting the last Sunday in January. And by then, they typically know the rates. And so usually our Maya rep will tease the rate formally. But we receive an actual signed letter certifying that this is your rate increase, usually the Tuesday or Wednesday following that.
Okay, thank you.
Timing-wise, what's your goal to identify, to get to a point where you have proposals that result in a balanced budget?
Certainly hopefully by the select board's first meeting in February, I'll be able to identify how the general government side of the budget is balanced. Again, it's just really figuring out what the schools can and will absorb of that deficit, which I don't anticipate that we'll solve in the joint meeting on the 26th, but shortly thereafter. Certainly by the end of February, we'll have to have a balanced budget to start, the budget office hours start, I think, the last week in March. But I'm optimistic that on the general government side, we'll have a path forward, certainly by the select board's first February meeting, which I think is the 9th.
Thank you.
The last thing I'll say, and Sean, I'm going to skedaddle and let Sean and David handle the capital part, but this budget currently does not assume any new debt service for capital. They're going to talk about how we're projecting that any capital we do this year would be through debt service. I'm not ruling it out right now, but I would like to get to a balanced budget before we include new debt service. There's a balancing act that capital has talked about and we'll have to continue to talk about. We expect from what we've put together, the debt service in fiscal 27 would probably be $165,000, $170,000. That's a big amount of money that I can save in the fiscal year 27 budget. But all of those things are absolutely critical needs, and they're going to talk about them, that are going to cost more if we do it the next year or if we wait 2 or 3 more years. So finding the balance between, making quick upfront savings, but doing it at the expense of then paying more 3 or 4 years down the road may not be the wisest. But for the purposes of the budget that you all saw and what's on the website, it doesn't include the debt service for capital. I hope to be able to add it back in, but again, we're going to have to wait to see where the path forward leads.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Too.
All right.
All right, onwards and upwards. 27 capital plan.
All right, so up on the screen, I have, and hopefully you can see it, and if you can't, let me know. I can zoom in and go get a little bit more zoomed in so you can see just less at a time. Just before I start going line by line, I'm going to go high level on the recommendations that administration has for fiscal year 2027. Any questions you have, feel free to either stop me or wait till the end and we can go through it. Just from a formatting perspective, everything that you see in this reddish salmon color is something that was initially a fiscal year 2027 request from departments that as part of the recommendation got pushed to either fiscal year 28 or a later fiscal year, just so you see what was initially part of that presentation. So starting off with the fire department, they had 2 requests for fiscal 27 that as part of the recommendation got pushed to fiscal 28 and 29 respectively. So we'll start here with the IT department with the police department server upgrade. This is something that is frankly desperately needed. It will improve our disaster recovery efforts. Some of the equipment we have is out of warranty. So just from a technical standpoint, it's important that we upgrade to just more current technology and will allow the town, both the police station and at town hall, just more backup in case that there's an outage, a quicker recovery time, but also less of an impact should we have an outage. And similarly to that, but in addition, we have this 17,000 expense, which will increase redundancy and will allow us to use some cloud server capacity as opposed to 100% on-site servers. So that's the IT department, which does tie into where we'll go next with the police department, since that hardware and it's located at the police department. Closing off the flooring updates that have been made over the past few years at the police department building, they've requested an additional $25,000 just to complete their 3rd floor carpeting. Having been over there recently, I can attest to the condition that it's in. You might take some of it with you if you walk down the hallway. So that will complete the interior flooring project over at the police department. Moving further down, we have this $95,000 expense, which is a security camera system upgrade, which encompasses both the police department and town hall, which would allow for a fully integrated system that allows for 24/7 monitoring and a comprehensive new system, which fills some gaps at the police station and town hall, and would allow for both buildings to have 24-hour surveillance as needed. This was a request that came, I'm not sure if the first one was fiscal 25 or 26, but that's not the first time for this request either. Moving down, there's a request for 10 new mobile data terminal replacements for the officers that they take from their vehicles into the station. Their recommendation, just as part of industry best practices, is to replace all of them at once as opposed to doing them piecemeal, just given compatibility issues between technology that the officers are utilizing. Generally, it just makes sense. They have a 5 to 7 year typical life cycle, and we are at the end of that, as we get into fiscal year 2027. And then finally, for the police department, we have $55,000 for armory updates. This is not making updates to the building itself, but the firearms and the equipment that they're using as part of their armory. Much of this cost will be at least partially offset in terms of getting new equipment that takes less time to update, to maintain. They're either having to utilize overtime for personnel to, and this has a lot to do with the optic system that they have as part of their service weapons. But they basically got the first generation of the equipment, which takes a long time to disassemble, clean, maintain, reassemble. So they're either having to take someone off their regular shift to maintain the equipment or have someone utilizing overtime to maintain that. And this would be a complete overhaul of their existing equipment without getting too far into the specifics of the police department's inventory. Moving on from police with the DPW, Highway Department, as Colin mentioned in his presentation, we are still utilizing several of those 2002 dump trucks. So this $300,000 would replace one of the 2002s, which are still operating but are certainly nearing end of life. Colin did mention the difficulty repairing and obtaining parts for those older vehicles as they are certainly near their end of life. You'll notice the one for this year does not have a sander included as future year requests have. That's because DPW and Highway are confident that they're able to utilize an existing sander from equipment that they have and just repurpose that towards a new vehicle, and they're confident that they would have a significant lifespan with the sander aspect only of that vehicle. As part of this, as we know, we're still waiting on a vehicle that was ordered several years ago. We anticipate a similar, hopefully not quite as long, but there's certainly a significant lead time to replacing these vehicles. And you'll see over the next few years, we have, basically one vehicle being replaced, requested over each of the next 4 years as well, and looking at potential cost increases the longer we wait for those. Then the last thing for Public Works is right here at Town Hall, $25,000 to repair the sprinkler system in the building. This past August, I believe, the library had a pinhole leak that turned into a larger leak, which resulted in the children's room being out of service for 2 days. That repair costs between $10,000 and $12,000 to take care of. It's been identified in working with our service provider for our sprinkler system that there are several other locations in Town Hall similar to the library that could develop into a situation that we saw. So this $25,000 is preemptive to mitigate existing issues that we have identified as part of the system here. One of the questions that came up at our capital meeting a few weeks ago in mid-December was, is this a Band-Aid or is this something that is, more preventative? And as I discussed then, it's somewhere in the middle. Replacing the entire sprinkler system at Town Hall is not feasible. It's going to cost them the several hundred thousands of dollars, if not more, and would result in basically the entire first floor ceiling being removed and then replaced, which, is not something that at this point is necessary. We're confident that the $25,000 would sufficiently put the system in a place that we're confident in it for the foreseeable future. Moving on to the school department, we have the MacBook replacements. The school department replaced just over half of the MacBooks last year as part of their, I believe it's 5-year, rotation through their laptops. I believe it'll either 60 or 65 laptops will be replaced with part of the $75,000. I think it's 60. And that would be 100% of laptops over the last 2 years that would be accounted for as part of this request. And then the very last thing, not including the sewer department, is the elementary school roof replacement study. So this is not something that will do any work to the Tyngsborough Elementary School roof, but that roof is original to the building, which is now at least 24, 25 years old. It's nearing end of life. And as part of the select board and capital assets stated goals to, look forward and be, preventative of some major issues that could come up, it's been identified as something that will allow us to apply for the accelerated repair program from the Mass School Building Authority, which would allow for reimbursement funds from the state. If we don't do this study, which we are not obligated to do, But if we don't do this study, we won't be eligible for the reimbursing funds from the state. So we could incur the entire cost when the roof is ready to be replaced, but if we don't do the study, it's really the first step in applying to that program. So it's something that we felt like we want to get ahead of it now. We'll get a comprehensive report from the vendor, which will allow us to get into that program, which generally takes, at least 2 or 3 years to get approval from the state before we can even think about hiring somebody to replace the roof. So while the roof does not need to be replaced this year necessarily, we are thinking ahead to make sure that we're in position so we don't have an emergency situation at the elementary school and be on the hook for 100% of the cost.
How much would they cover?
It depends. It's really kind of up to the application process. I don't have a figure for that off the top, but it's certainly more than, it would leave us on the hook for certainly less than 100% and would more than pay for itself, given it would cost, we have a ballpark projection for fiscal year 30 at $600,000. I suspect that's likely low, given the size of the building and cost increases over the next several years. So where that leaves us for excluding the sewer department, which is their request will be funded by the enterprise fund, leaves us with a total request for fiscal year 27 at $767,364. Initial requests from departments, which include all of those salmon color requests that are moved to fiscal years, initial requests were just under $1.6 million. So it's, $830,000 or so we did end up pushing off, the largest of those being from the fire department. The tank one replacement at $450,000 is the largest expense there. Sorry. Certainly happy to answer any questions that you have. I know I kind of breezed through all of those requests, and I'm happy to, if you'd like, talk about some of the requests that were pushed to additional fiscal years as well.
When you look at the request, the cost of the department, some of them are like similar. I don't know the technology differences, but like, say, camera and security upgrade systems. There's one for the elementary school, one for the town hall, another for the police department, I believe here. So are we looking at could we couple those projects and maybe save some money?
So we did partially do that. So the town hall security system upgrade was lumped in with the police department. So we were looking at, approximately $25,000 to $30,000 for town hall, and the remaining being with the police department. I think their initial request was either $65,000 or $70,000. So we should see a slight savings doing them together and having one integrated system, which will end up being a better system, which will allow the police department, as part of the system they have at their building, to also monitor town hall 24/7. So we definitely did think of that.
What about the school? Because they also have requests. I'm assuming it's different platforms.
Yeah, they would operate
But
slightly
similar
differently.
vendor, right?
It's certainly something we could look at. I'm not sure how feasible that would be to do all together.
There's a couple others, like water heaters, right? I mean, granted, there'll be different sizes and different things needed, but if you're gonna work with one vendor to install them, right? If you take a look at that, is there any potential savings to say, hey, if we do all 3 buildings versus the 2, right, this year, is there any savings there, right?
I suspect for water heaters, probably not.
Yeah,
We actually replaced the one at town hall.
you got the
2 weeks ago.
110 for the elementary school. I think you had some more above, maybe on the police station.
Sure. The heat pump and water heater, sure. Yeah, I think that was identified as part of the report that was done, I believe, in 2023 as part of the capital plan with Lavely Brenzinger, just part of the anticipated maintenance of the building. So thankfully, it's not at end of life yet, but planning out a few years in advance, just knowing that it's going to be reaching end of life by fiscal year 30.
A lot of these things, they're on the state list. So the pricing, a lot of the negotiation the state has already done on the pricing, so we don't get as much. But we have, like for the police department, we've bundled things together because we sit there and say, don't treat them as, 5 different projects and we try to piecemeal. It's like, we should try to spend X amount per year on those things, bundle them so you can get one vendor that comes in. Like when we did the parking lot And we did a couple things in there so that you could get more bang for your buck, if you will. Some of them, like the TES stuff, like the cameras, theirs in a much larger scale and it's further out. That's that balance that we were trying to talk about. You sit there and say, ooh, do I pull some in to save a couple of bucks? Or where I'm tight right now, we're probably doing more of the pushing out, and we're trying to just not push out things. You don't want to push something out and then a year later it costs you twice as much, or it breaks during that period of time, and then you're really scrambling. So, you know, some of it is trying to figure out, okay, what can we push out? We are trying to aggregate, having them aggregate as best we can on some of those.
And to that point, one of the things that we did loop together, and we talked about this pretty extensively at our capital meeting in December, is the police department building envelope. One of the questions we got is, could we break this up and make those into a series of smaller requests? But generally, if you're putting this out to bid and you're having a firm come and take care of significant issues that are, need to be taken care of at the police department, generally it's going to be more cost effective to take care of them, or as much of them as they can while they're there, as opposed to having them come back and forth and back and forth. And as part of that building envelope, one of these requests that was for fiscal 27, town meeting did appropriate about $180,000 for fiscal year 26. So that is really part two of some exterior updates to the police department building as well.
And Sean or David, so if we go with that level of borrowing, what's the annual debt service on that? Is it 5-year borrowing?
Yeah, we would
So I would think most is by 5, and I was actually trying to calculate the total borrowing cost there. I used about a $750,000 loan with 5% interest, and that puts us about $850,000. Divide that by 5.
So 160 or so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So-
calculated
You
it
got
earlier
things
with
falling
4,
off that
but
schedule too, right? I'm assuming we're going through a borrowing cycle, or is this, would this be unique?
Say again?
Right now, we do have some borrowing that's already going on, right?
Yeah,
So you have some things falling off?
I was gonna bring that up. I hope that you guys saw the capital projects workbook I put together for you with the schedule on it. So in FY '27, that's about $435,000. For FY '28, right now, it looks like it's $162,000. So there's gonna be some capacity opened up into the early 30s. I know, crazy to think we're almost there, but we actually have 0 of everything is peeled off by then. So because of how we use the CARES and ARPA funds for the one-time capital purchases, we don't really have, we haven't followed a steady capital plan, but we're saying that there is going to be capacity there.
If you were to project what a steady capital spend for this town is by year, is this right in size, or is it really low, or is it?
I think it's low. One of the things that we've been talking about is, so we had an artificially low, we talked about, we didn't borrow for 3 years on any of the capital. We used all the ARPA funds for that. We didn't put it to operational, we did it all for capital. So what we borrowed during that period of time was artificially low. We can take more, we're gonna need to take more. There's some things that we've pushed off on there. However, when you look at that, that's operational debt management. We still have to be cognizant of, we have long-term with the debt exclusions and things like that. So we've been looking at some of the new numbers and trying to project those things out. But I think that, even if we do 170 this year and we have stuff coming off, I think we're light. I think we're probably, what do you think we should be having when we did those numbers with the minimum that were in there?
If you ask me the debt floor, I would say generally 2% of your operating budget, which is, about $50 million. And I'm not saying that we can afford that, but I'm saying if you're asking for the kind of the best practices, that's kind of how you want to reinvest in the infrastructure.
Thank you.
One question I had for you, when we last talked, so the TES roof, that's 15 grand. I would love to, rather than borrowing at 5%, even though it's 5%, it's only 5 years. Let's see, while we're making some cuts, whether we can go through and get that into the operating budget. We do need to do it,
Right.
right? And if I looked at the MSBA accelerated repair program, typically it's 40 to 60% is what they cover. That's what it has been. There's no guarantees, but that's why you want to be in that program. Better to have the state give us 40 to 60% than us doing that. But we had
Yeah.
talked about it and said, what do we want to do here?
Right, and that's certainly gone parallel with our discussions about, what can the school department budget take on? Is there room? Is there not room? How much of the, fiscal year 2027 projected deficit are they going to be on the hook for? I imagine that will be part of those discussions as well, and we'll loop that right in. But given that we had talked about it, I don't have an answer for that at this moment.
Yeah, I figured that was going to be part of the things that were happening, because I know that was still on there, and it's like,
Yep,
okay.
for sure.
Is the backup and recovery solution for the servers at the police station, are those backups being done right there at the station and stored there, or are they using a remote?
That is allowing us to take some of our backup recovery systems from being hardware on-site servers and going to the cloud, so that if we have a major issue, we have a server outage, we have a hack, we have a fire, God forbid,
Yeah.
information will be in the cloud, so it's much easier to get back and get us back online, as opposed to our equipment just went up in a flood or a fire or a hack and can't get it back.
Okay, so that $17,000 is, that would be an annual expense going forward.
Not necessarily, no. That's a one-time request there will be some, associated expenses as part of maintaining our infrastructure across the board. And I'm sure I'm not the most qualified person to talk about IT projects, even in this room, but their request is a one-time request from the IT department.
My understanding, Larry, as an IT guy,
Yeah.
it's a one-time upgrade for the infrastructure pieces, so that you can then leverage cloud backups. There will be subscription costs for the cloud
Okay,
storage.
all right.
And you'll see their budget, the operational budget for IT also went up. Some of that is software, which has gone through the roof, which is crazy. But some of it is some of those pieces. So that's meant to be a one-time thing. There are operational things, but they're not being asked for here.
Okay, all right. All right, I was just curious. I know there are solutions for servers that are just completely cloud-based, that don't require hardware, that will come in and, maybe they're a little bit more expensive, over time. There's also solutions that a server that sits there to back up other servers, and then it's local, and then you're saying, well, we're going to do that locally, but have a connection from that to the cloud, so if something happens there.
I have it written in my list so there's the backup, but then there's also the police department server upgrade. I want to find out what it would take to get, rather than hardware, to actually have everything be cloud-based, so that you're doing some of that. I don't know, police stuff there can be some challenges in what you can use as far as cloud, but I've been cloud for a while, and overall, the costs are more, like over a long-term period, but it's spread out a little bit
Right.
differently, gives you a lot more flexibility. So it's on my list to find out from Tom what the details are around that.
And it's an awkward position being here, because you're looking at stuff and you're like, well, I know a little bit about servers and a little bit about backup, and I've got some general questions, but yeah, this is, somebody went through a lot of time and trouble to come up with these numbers that are based on all kinds of information that we just don't have, that isn't available here. So that's I guess.
Did they
one
get
of
the details from the request, Sean?
I have it.
Yeah.
in
No, I
front-
didn't know whether they'd got the long list with the explanations
Yep.
and things. Okay,
Yeah,
The server's doubled like over the last month, so,
imagine that. huh?
yeah, DRAM is through the roof right now.
Yeah, I'm
From the
very
re-
much-
No, not tariffs. It's AI drive. I'm in
But
semiconductor, so.
From the request, and I better to read from what Tom submitted than to rely on my understanding of it.
Yes.
The proposed solution would utilize on-site hardware appliances for some image storage, but would also leverage secure cloud storage to provide additional recovery capabilities. In addition, the appliances could be leveraged to provide temporary recovery of critical infrastructure while hardware issues are resolved. That's the basic explanation of hybrid between physical servers and cloud storage.
Okay.
A little bit of both.
Do they run closed, like circuit TV or some type of security too, right? So they're gonna need some type of on-prem.
Yep. So this is that other balance that we have where we might not have all the info. We are also in open meetings, so there's some things that we don't ask about when it comes to security systems. It's one of those ones, but yes, yes, there are some things, but that's where I usually just write it down and say, all right, I'll go through and talk to them directly about it. But I think we should have some more details on each of those items so that people understand how much of that is one time, what is it, what's the impact to operational, and then,
And I can answer the operational piece as well. The anticipated yearly increase would be about $5,000. So it would jump from about $1,500 in operations and maintenance to about $6,500.
Yeah, maybe just add like the recurring piece to the right-hand side on anything that would have it.
Yeah, I can add some
make it
notes in there,
simple.
for sure.
Yeah, so I'm looking, so it's 70 and 17, so it's really, it's kind of it's all hardware and,
the server is different, though. The server is, that's a physical server, and the software that they're using right now, my understanding is that it requires that. What I need to find out is, okay, will that still be the case 5 years from now when that machine needs to be replaced and some of those things? So
is it one machine?
my understanding is that there's one that being replaced here, but we have certain machines that are redundant with each other across different departments. This is replacing the one that's allocated for the police. That's my understanding based on the,
Yeah, and the existing
request.
equipment we have is significantly out of date, out of warranty, requires significant patches, software patches to it frequently, which, end up adding existing, basically like maintaining an old vehicle,
Yeah.
but, transferred over to just a server.
How old is it?
I don't know if I have the year on it. I don't think it was included. Its replacement frequency is about 7 years.
yeah, and when these things go, the challenge is you can't get parts, I mean, you sit there, it's like, once, getting 7 years is really good, because what happens is you get no support. It's one of those, if it breaks, you're on your own. Unfortunately, it's a lot less than it is with your car. We're running the dump trucks for 2002s, but the servers, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But that's where sometimes the cloud can help, because you're not dealing with that,
Right.
the spike where you buy it and then you wait, and then spike. It levels those off and allows you to have a little bit more scalability if you have growth or whatever.
Right, and then nothing gets outdated because they're worried about it on the other side of the line.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. Any further questions? Okay. All right. So in general, tonight was really just kind of a preview of things to come and work in progress. So it's just a snapshot into work in progress.
Yep.
So, and yeah, we appreciate everyone's time and letting us in town know where and what's going on. And with that, can I think we are good to close it. Can I get a motion to close?
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourn, okay. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.